Welcome to the Oso Spurs tactical special alongside A licensed coach JJ. How are you, JJ?
Hey Jim, I'm doing well, thanks.
Good, good. JJ and I are going to cover off the game we just had against Nottingham Forest. Were those two goals we conceded errors or tactics or somewhere in between? But equally, we want to also analyse Tottenham's wingers because there was a big shift in performance when we saw Odegaard and Tell on the wings. I should say, rather than performance, a very different type of wide threat we offered versus when we have Son and Johnson. So we're going to look under the hood into that and look at what's different and maybe make a decision on whether we think one option's stronger than the other for Spurs moving forward this season. But JJ, you said it won't take long to cover off the goals today. One was what deemed to be a goalkeeping error in many people's eyes, and the other seemed to be, well, maybe it was a goalkeeping error as well, but it was what looked just almost too easy for Langer to whip that cross in and get that goal. But any of those you want to start on again and cover?
I mean, we can take it in chronological order. So we can take the first goal, which is disappointing from a couple of elements. So it's a set piece, right? It's a corner coming in from the Forest right, Tottenham's left, and then the way that Tottenham set up zonally is we bring our right back across, and then it wasn't the same kind of thing. I've seen a few people maybe talking about the goals against Wolves and marking at the edge of the box. This wasn't really that. The situation is that the first semi-error is from Porro, who is our first marker. Okay, so fullback goes to the edge of the 6-yard box, and that's his zone. He takes his eye off the ball. For me, if you watch it back, you'll see him like really stooping his head. So he's got up to meet the ball, but he's not got up to meet the flight of it. And he's taken his eye off it, and he's kind of almost like facing his head directly down. And it doesn't allow him to get a clean and a true contact on the ball. So it kind of slides off his forehead and then goes zipping across the penalty area. I can't remember who the Nottingham Forest player is. It's probably someone like Gibbs White in that deeper position, then kind of has a swipe at it and he misses it as well. But I think it takes a touch off him as well. But Matisse Tell is right there. He's marking him. There's nothing wrong with that either. But it then just continues its trajectory to the left-hand edge of the penalty area. And it's just at that moment, again, it's kind of not an error, but it's Decky not quite being on his game, right? I feel that Decky in full flow, when he was absolutely dominating and he was fully fit and, match sharp, he probably gets across and puts a bit more pressure on the shot. And fair play to the Forest player, it's a really true connection. He catches it really nicely. And I actually think if it doesn't take the deflection off Bentancur, which is the next kind of element of it, it looked like, from where I was standing anyway, it looked like it was arrowing towards the roof of the net. So it would have been difficult for the keeper. It then takes a deflection off the underside of Bentancur's thigh as he's trying to block. So again, players are getting out, they're getting across, they're trying to get in the way of the shot. It's unfortunate. It takes a deflection, goes under. And then the next thing for me is the rotation of the ball. So it completely changes the rotation of the ball. A ball would naturally be rotating over. It starts rotating under, which means it comes off the grass slightly differently when it takes a bounce. This is me being as generous as I can possibly be to Vicario because... and I said this to you before we came on, Jim, get a goalkeeping coach on because, they're not my specialist area, but my feeling is he should still do better with this. Yes, it's coming at him quick. Yes, it's, it is taken an odd kind of downward spin, which kind of makes it pop up off the grass a little bit more than if it was top spinning into the grass. But he gets like two hands are behind it. It's not like it's gone past his fingers. It actually goes over his wrists. He's in a position. I just feel like, again, he's just that fraction of a second late on it, and he just doesn't get a surface behind it. For me, that's one that Vicario normally saves with his quality. So, you add all of those little things up across a very simple set piece and across 2-3 seconds worth of time, and it leads to a goal. And it's it's a really true strike. It's a great hit from the lad outside the box. So loads of little pieces that we could have done better. Certainly the clearing header in the initial phase, and Vicario should probably still be saving it. But we find ourselves 1-0 down, and we've literally handed Nottingham Forest exactly what they want and what they need for the way they're set up to play and the way they were coming to play against us.
And we said that before the game, don't we? Because we were both at the ground and we said that their game plan will be get an early goal from a set piece and counter Tottenham and just get. But and it was, you watched it unfold and you thought, like you say, we didn't cover ourselves in glory, but it was a great strike that probably doesn't get hit that well more times than not. And then on top of that, there were just 2 or 3 kind of half moments where you thought that deflection, the way the ball span, then Vicario not getting the best hand towards it, all those kind of things happen at once. It's just a chain reaction of unfortunate events. But you put yourself in situations to get unlucky sometimes. And I think we do that quite a lot. And that goes on to the second goal we conceded. From where I was sat, everyone went, what a howler from the goalkeeper. Is there areas in which that was just a really good cross? I think it was Alanga, wasn't it, on the left, who whipped that beautiful ball in. It did look easy for them when they did that, and you could almost see it coming in already. But Vicario had committed. Where do you think we could have done better there?
You could roll that one way, way back. So you perfectly summed it up, Jim, in terms of Tottenham doing things that creates the maximum amount of jeopardy for us as a football team. And for me, it starts with Romero herring up the pitch to slam into somebody on the halfway line, because that's what he's decided to do. There was no need for it in that instance. There was no need for it in that phase of play. And so we concede a deep set piece. We set up our line exactly where you would expect Tottenham to set up their line, because we defend quite high and we want to make it as difficult for them to get close to the goal, right? We want them to have the perfect delivery hung up and then dipping into the penalty area. But they do something quite clever with it, and so that's fair play to them. They run a trick kind of set piece, where instead of delivering it in, which is what everybody's expecting, they kind of push it out to the flank. There's an argument that we could have got out to it quicker, but I'm not sure. I think we get a yard or so closer to it. I still don't think we would have been in a position to affect Alanga's cross. This is clearly something they'd worked on, and they executed it beautifully. The delivery, which is something we know is a real strength for Forest, and that's why Chris Wood is having the season he's having, was spot on. It was right on the money. And then from that moment in there, yes, Mickey could possibly take a step back. As soon as you see Elanga set himself and head down, you know that ball's coming in and you know where it's going. It's very unlikely to be going anywhere else than the zone that Wood is. I could argue that I might want Mickey to be looking at that and then reaching and looking for where Wood is and taking a step back. But again, that's probably being too harsh. Vicario gets it wrong for me. If you're coming, you make up your mind, and it's that fraction of a second difference. If he makes up his mind that he's coming, when he sees the flight of the ball, he's got to come and he's got to do, he's got to take everyone in front of him, even if it's just to get gloves to it to punch it. And he's got to punch his way all the way through Mickey van der Ven or all the way through Chris Wood. He's got to, clatter them the way that Caio Santos clattered Maddison last week. That's what you've got to do. That's once you've made that decision to go, you've got to go. He's a fraction of a second late with his decision making, but then he decides to go and he gets absolutely nowhere near it. And those are the margins. Those are the margins we're talking about. The quality of the delivery from Elanga. Chris Wood knows exactly what he's doing, and he gets in there and he gets ahead on it. You could argue that if he stays home, does he save it? Because Wood puts it pretty much towards the side netting. It's a really good header, similar to Richarlison's later in the game, similar kind of thing. But you would say in that situation, when you do come and you flap and you miss, which is a repetitive thing from Vicario, it's disappointing. And you'd rather he came and took everything and potentially gave away a penalty, or he stayed on his line and had an opportunity to make a save.
So welcome to part 2. We're focused on Tottenham's defence in part 1, and now we're going to be focusing on what Tottenham did well against Nottingham Forest, which was the wingers and wide play going forward. As some other areas of the attack, we did create a lot of chances, right, JJ? So it was a different pair of wingers than normal, not all by choice, but it felt like they were quite effective in Talanoda. We kind of, people who aren't qualified like myself, often write them as dribbly wingers, because that's what we call them, right? They dribble the ball well, and they can take on their man and beat them with some nice trickery. And we saw that with them. How do you kind of summarise the difference in a Odegaard pairing versus a Son and Johnson pairing? And which one would you say was more effective?
Yeah, there's definitely huge differences in the way that those two pairs kind of act when they're out there and they've got the ball at feet. I think what we saw from Telenodobert is something that is a key part of Ange's system. He does want a 1v1 wide forward or winger, right? He wants players who can commit fullbacks and commit wide, the wide player of the defensive team, to draw people across. So whether it's to them get in and then produce crosses or shots or whatever it might be, or to draw people over so that we can get a 3-man overload in those half spaces, that's part of the system. So it's one of the reasons that we don't necessarily see, for me anyway, the greatest value when we have Son and Johnson, is because those two are, for me, much closer to touchline wingers. Now, Son's an exceptional case because he's an unbelievable wide forward. You know, he can threaten on the outside. He can take you on the outside. He's got equal quality with his left foot, but then he can also come inside and, you know, he can either play and interact with the striker or with a number 10, or he can whip that shot that we know so well from him. He's slightly different, but he still is better operating when he's got space in behind and then he's got a channel to move into on the inside, right? Johnson for me is exactly the same. If Johnson's much wider, apart from the really good work that he does when he gets into the box and scores goals, when he's out wider and he's got more space, so space in behind a fullback and a wide channel to operate in, that's for me where he does his best work. And so both of those are not necessarily looking to slow the ball down and take on the fullback or take on their opponent. That's exactly what Odobert did with, you know, basically his first opportunity, and tried to do it consistently, and Tell as well. Tell showed he was willing to have the ball to feet. He was willing to threaten on both sides. And most of the time, him being right footed, he'd want to eventually come in and then try to deliver with his right foot. And that was the only bit that was missing from him. And I think similar to Odobert as well, he was looking to get in there, and it's just that final delivery was the only thing missing. We put a lot of crosses in, but the quality was coming from Pedro Porro. It wasn't coming from Tell and from Odobert. So that's one of those things we should be really positive and excited about, is that we've got a different option and a different way that we can threaten the opposition. And what we're going to want to see is that improvement and that development in their game of identifying the correct delivery for the correct moment and then being able to execute it.
Felt like another player on that pitch had a difficult day, but did get their goal and was clearly a target of all these crosses in Richarlison. What did you make of him on the day? And did you think he got fair or unfair kind of focus from a lot of the fans and pundits when I think at one point he had 4 what they class as big chances? Now, I don't know what a website classes as a big chance, how they quantify that, but he supposedly missed 4 before he took his chance. Do you feel those crosses were because Richarlison was on the pitch, that was the reason for them? And how do you think he got on in the attack?
Yeah, I definitely think that was, you know, he provides a different focal point, and he's certainly not doing the same running and the same tracking the way that Solanke does. So it did feel to me, and it's a surprising tactic. You go up against Nottingham Forest, who are, you know, they're set up defensively to be very strong under the high ball. You know, they've got good, strong defenders. So, you know, in that initial phase, you thought to yourself, okay, this is kind of playing into their hands. But as the game went on, my feeling is that we forced Forest into a change when they added another centre half, and that is credit to what was trying to be achieved. That actually that changed. I don't think that was a, you know, preordained change that they were making. It felt to me like in the second half they felt they needed to plug that, because we were starting to increase the, you know, maybe not the frequency but the quality of the delivery and the danger. So we had a couple of moments, didn't we? We had a header from Decky which was cleared off the line, and then Richarlison had a couple of chances and he had a sighter just before he scored, right? So he, in the first half, maybe wasn't having the best game. There's the moment with Papsar where potentially Decky's kind of almost taken the chance off Papsar. It felt like Papsar, if he was onside, would have nodded that ball in at the far post from a delivery, whereas Richarlison kind of took it off his head. But then in the second half, we'd figured it out. Richarlison was getting on the end of things. He got one that Sells did really well to get down to his right-hand side and kind of claw it away. But then the next one, the delivery was on the money, and Richarlison with a great header. It was a really, really good header. That is a, you know, you might want to get your air quotes out. That's a proper old-fashioned number 9's header. It was, you know, ball whipped in and he's just helped it onwards and round into the second post. Lovely finish, really good finish. It's one of the threats that he does bring. And yeah, you could argue he missed a few chances. He's not played a great deal of football either, but he got his goal and he's always a threat. So he's come in, very limited minutes, but he's already bagged himself a couple of goals in that time. I think maybe some of the criticism's a bit harsh. There's definitely a player in there. The biggest problem we've had with Richarlison is actually getting him on the football pitch.
Yes, when he's consistently playing, he's pushing himself back into his national side. So he's clearly not an awful player when he plays a lot. The issue is we can't get him playing a lot of football regularly. But the other part of the attack I thought that was interesting was not having James Maddison in there, and that seemed to really change things up as well. The creativity, like you touched on earlier, really seemed to feel like get it to Odegaard and Tell or Porro. Give it to him and he'll whip in the ball. That always seemed to feel like, was he, am I reading the game right, that he always was kind of like this makeshift creative midfielder type role at times, sat on the right, because we just didn't have that player they could pass to with confidence, because only Romero and Porro seem to be able to break those lines with good forward passes consistently in the middle of the park.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think Forest was set up very much once they got their goals. They were set up to plug the middle of the pitch as best they could, and then they were brave in terms of their defending. So they did invite Tell and Odegaard on. So they would run their midfield cover over late enough to kind of invite those players to kind of play 1v1. They backed their fullbacks to defend for long enough 1v1 to then bring that support player in and kind of box them in. The idea being that they couldn't then easily switch the ball into midfield. But what we've got, and with the way that Ange's system works and with the personnel that we've got, is we've got someone like Pedro Porro who comes into that, very, very high inverted fullback position now in the opposition half. And time and again, he was getting good space, and he and Odegaard were working the ball back and forward until there was enough space, and he was delivering the ball in. And we know that Porro's got that in the locker. He's a very high quality player going forward, and his delivery is exceptional. And his numbers must be fantastic in terms of assists and chance creation.
One last question for you, JJ. Then, based on what you've seen, would you start with, if you could only choose one to start with, you can, in the game against Bodø/Glimt, would you start with Tell and Odegaard or Son and Johnson? You can't mix and match.
All right. If I'm not allowed to mix and match, then I am, and everybody's fully fit, I'm starting Son and Johnson in the home leg. So that might be a different conversation for the away leg if I have a look at what Bodø like to do. But yeah, I'm going with Son and Johnson. But the great thing and the positive out of the weekend's game that we can take is you wouldn't be disappointed if it was the other way.
Yeah. And I will let you then finish it off with, who would the ultimate pairing be in your opinion?
I think I do like the idea of mix and match. I think Son, if he's rested, has more quality than Tell currently has. And so I'd like to see Son on the left-hand side. But yeah, I think there's a shout for Odegaard, 1v1 on the other side. And then you provide a completely different attacking threat on both sides. And then you can mix and match and change it as you want in, the later the game goes on, by bringing on Johnson and changing the threat on the right, and then bringing on Tell and changing the threat on the left.
Brilliant. Thank you, as always, JJ. We move forward, roll on. At least it's not Liverpool away next. And then we do have, though, a very exciting European tie, which we will also be doing some tactical shows on as well, which I'm looking forward to. Up the Spurs, roll on Liverpool, and roll on Bodø/Glimt.